Well, good afternoon or good evening, depending on which time zone you're in. My name is Jamlik-Omari Johnson. I am from the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine, where I serve as the interim chair for the Department of Radiology and an associate dean for faculty leadership and professional development. I'm also the co-chair for the AUR SIG entitled Later. It's my pleasure to host today's Grand Rounds, and I'll be introducing the speakers shortly. But in terms of just the background and what's also going on with the Grand Round series, the AUR Grand Round series is designed to promote junior faculty, to increase the profile and the knowledge of AUR affinity groups and SIGs, and to provide a greater value for AUR membership through increasing content and discussion. As a plug for the later, for those who may not know, this is a relatively early or young SIG. Leaders are advocating for diversity, inclusion in radiology. And really the focus for this group is to not just create community, but also a framework for discussion and best practices around the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Um, this particular Grand Rounds has been sponsored by the RRA, the Radiology Research Alliance. But our guest today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Angela Choe, who is at the the Penn State Health and Penn State College of Medicine, assistant professor in the Department of Radiology, also the associate program director for the diagnostic radiology program, and she also serves as the vice chair for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Known quantity at Penn State, was a resident there and a breast fellow, now a breast imager. But we are very glad to have Dr. Choe here to present to us catalyzing efforts to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in radiology, identifying needs, trends, and strategies for implementation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for that introduction. And I'd like to thank the AUR committee who've invited me for this talk. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about myself, where I come from, and the work that we did in the Radiology Research Alliance in the task force last year about implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those of you who don't know me, I grew up in South Korea, and I was born in Seoul, Korea, which is about there in the map. And this is me with my sisters in a picture from Korea. There's me with a little page boy haircut. And I came to the United States when I was 12. I went to Goucher College, majored in chemistry. I attended University of Maryland School of Medicine. I finished my internal medicine internship at Northwestern University, followed by diagnostic radiology residency at Penn State University. And then came back as a breast imaging fellow, and then became an attending 6 years ago. So I was one of the inaugural members of the AUR RDS Scholars, which really allowed me to learn all the tools needed to promote this idea. So these are my fellow scholars in the inaugural program, and it's been a wonderful work and networking program. So I wanted to let you know, if you're interested in doing it, it's a really worthwhile program. These are the members of our task force. I was co-chair with Supriya Gupta, Dr. Skanashan, Hobbs, Probin, Awan, Hardy, and Strauss were in my group. And as a result of our work together, we published the Multilevel Approach to Support DEI in Radiology, published in 2022 in the Journal of Academic Radiology, and also Current Perception of Diversity in Academic Radiology, a mixed method study of radiology program directors. I'm going to be focusing on the first paper that we worked on. So to begin with, I'd like to discuss what diversity is. It is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements. So it can be divided into several characteristics. One is internal diversity, something that a person cannot change. This includes race, ethnicity, age, gender, physical and mental abilities. External diversity, which are traits which can be changed over time. So personal interests, education, appearance and life experience. Organizational diversity. These are characteristics within a workplace that distinguish one employee from another. So this includes job function, place of work, pay type, and management status. And then finally, worldview diversity. It's how a person conceptualizes the world, such as political beliefs, moral compass, outlook in life, and philosophy. So I'd like to define what equity is. This is in promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within procedures, process, and distribution of resources by institutions and systems. So here's a nice diagram of what we're talking about. So inequity is unequal access to opportunity. So if you see this person on the tree's left, there are lots of apples to be had, but this person on the right has very few apples to choose from. Equality means that you have the same ladder that was given to both people, but you still have unequal distribution of the apples compared to the person on the right. Equity basically allows one to create custom tools that identify and address inequality. And then justice is fixing the system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunities to both people involved. So what is inclusion? It's an outcome to ensure that those who are diverse feel accepted and welcome. So why does DEI matter? People with different personal experiences and backgrounds bring a wider variety of perspectives. Various points of view lead to better problem solving. And diverse teams can boost employee engagement and productivity. So to talk about existing trends, there's significant and rapid change in the composition of the population of the United States. By the year 2050, the number of Asians and Hispanics are estimated to triple, while the African-American population is expected to double. Recruiting physicians from diverse race and ethnicity allows better understanding of the needs of an increasingly diverse population. So in 2020, we're finding a much more racially and ethnically diverse population than measured in 2010. So here's an example of what we're finding. In 2010, 63% of the population was white, and 12% were Black, 17% were Hispanic. And then in 2020, 57% are white, 12% are Black, and then almost 20% are Hispanic. And there's a 6% Asian population. So the percentage of all active physicians by race and ethnicity in 2018, this is a map of the how many ethnic physicians are included. So you can see in the pie, a very large population of physicians come from the white population, and it gets smaller and smaller as the other races are involved. And for example, African-American physicians only are estimated to be about 5%, whereas the population represents 15%. Hispanic physicians make up only 6%, whereas the population is 19%. So current state of diversity in radiology, we are the 9th largest ACGME training specialty, but we're ranked 16th for American Indian, Alaska Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, ranked 17th for representation for women, 18th for African American and underrepresented minorities, and 19th for Hispanic. Compared to the 20 largest medical field, radiology is ranked 18th for overall diversity. There's underrepresentation of women in radiology. Less than 30% of radiology residents are women. Less than 10% of radiology department chairs are women, and less than 9% of editors-in-chief of radiology-related journals are women. So as you can see from the ACGME data, there were 27% women going into radiology, and the data from 2019 to 2020 shows, again, only 27% of women going into radiology. So there is a business case for diversity. So McKinsey report performance of companies found that ethnically diverse executive teams have a higher profitability. So gender diverse executive teams are 21% more likely to see above average profits, and ethnically diverse executive teams outperformed others by 36%. So here's a graph of, this is gender diversity. As you can see, between 2014 and 2019, there's greater profitability for gender diversity here. And then ethnic diversity also wins big by an increase of 36% in the business world. So why do we need to increase diversity in healthcare? Racial and ethnic diversity in healthcare workforce has profound implications for the US healthcare system. Increasing diversity will improve the healthcare access and quality for minority patients. This will strengthen the healthcare delivery at multiple levels. This will enhance educational experiences for all health professional students, also promote relevant research, and make needed changes in healthcare policy. So some of the cultural barriers in the patient-physician communication, it contributes to differences in understanding the cause, treatment, and outcomes of the disease process because there are problems in communication. Patients seeing physicians of their own race or ethnicity feel more involved in their care process. And this results in higher satisfaction and better health outcomes. So I'm going to be discussing some strategies for implementing DEI in radiology. So achieving diversity requires sustained and thoughtful efforts at several levels of medical education. It begins at the undergraduate level, continues throughout medical school and beyond. So the ACR Commission for Women and Diversity identified possible reasons why women are not going into radiology. One is that there's inadequate exposure of medical students to go into radiology. There's also the perception that there's decreased patient-physician contact in radiology, and there's lack of minority role models and mentors. And there may be underlying implicit or unconscious bias. So we broke up the strategies to implement DEI for individual level versus organizational level. At the individual level, you can start by identifying and diminishing your own bias, learn how to respond to your own implicit bias, and educate yourself for cultural competency and sensitivity. There is a memory effect called priming, which gets created when one activity unconsciously impacts subsequent behaviors. So if we can consciously prime people to pay attention to their own bias, this can lead to better decision-making. So for example, when you're looking at people's resumes for interviews, you can ask these following questions. Does this person's resume remind you in any way about yourself? Does it remind you of somebody you know? Is that positive or negative? Are there things about the resume that particularly influence your impression, and are they really relevant to the job? And then what assessments have you already made about the person? Are these grounded in solid information, or are they simply your own interpretation? Reorganizing structures and systems can also help mitigate bias. Structure creates behavior in organizations, and by creating consistency in how certain processes get carried out, you can encourage less biased behavior. For example, structured interviews. We can also have accountability where we institute diversity metrics, which allows recognition when bias is occurring. So some of the inclusive leaders characteristics include commitment, courage, cognizance, curiosity, cultural intelligence, and collaboration. So commitment. Highly inclusive leaders are committed to diversity and inclusion because these objectives align with their personal values and they believe in the business case. Being inclusive of diversity is a big challenge. It takes time and energy. And it's about giving people the opportunity to achieve what they can achieve. A strong sense of fair play is rooted in personal experiences. Leaders need to invest in people, build shared aspirations, and build an understanding for the business case for diversity. Inclusive leaders need courage because we need to speak up and challenge the status quo, but also be humble about our own strengths and weaknesses. Challenging others is the expected focus of leaders, and challenging entrenched organizational attitudes and practices takes courage. Vulnerability in being an inclusive leader when confronting others may put you in the spotlight and turn you onto the speaker. Having humility in leadership is predicated when employees feel included. Humility allows learning from criticism and also allows you to learn from different points of view. The third trait is cognizance of bias. Highly inclusive leaders are mindful of personal and organizational blind spots and self-regulate to ensure fair play. Leaders are self-aware and they acknowledge that their organizations have unconscious bias. They put policies and processes in place to mitigate these unconscious biases. And biases are our Achilles heel, potentially resulting in decisions that are not fair. And highly inclusive leaders have curiosity. They have an open mindset. They have the desire to understand what others view and experience the world, and they can tolerate ambiguity. With curiosity comes learning and new ideas. And leaders accept their limitations and look to other viewpoints of others to complete the picture. And quest for continual learning will help open-mindedness and with empathy. Time and effort are required to engage others with diversity. And you have to have active listening skills. And then inclusive leaders must have cultural intelligence. These leaders are confident and effective in cross-cultural interactions. They have understanding of cultural similarity and differences, which are important. They recognize that their own culture impacts how they view the world. And we need to defy ethnocentric tendencies that cause people to judge other cultures as inferior to our own. And they're adept at changing their verbal and nonverbal behavior according to cultural demands. And finally, collaboration. Highly inclusive leaders empower individuals to create and leverage the thinking of a diverse group. Collaboration will only work if individuals are willing to share their diverse perspectives. We need to encourage people autonomy and empower their teams to connect with each other in pursuit of diverse perspectives. And diversity of thinking is a critical ingredient for effective collaboration. Now, moving on to organizational strategies. We need to increase early diagnostic radiology exposure to improve diversity. Early intervention in the pre-college level from kindergarten to 12th grade and the college level are critical for engaging underrepresented minority students into STEM. We need dedicated career development programs in high school. We need to have early stage pipeline programs such as the ACR Peer Initiative, which identifies underrepresented minority students, and lots of faculty can sign up for volunteering for mentorship. So this is just a leaky STEM pipeline example. Let's say there are 4 million ninth graders in 2001 trying to go into STEM. By 2005, 4 years later, only about 3 million high schools graduate. And then only about 2 million have college plans. and only about 1 million are college ready. And then that dwindles down to about 280,000 students who are going into STEM. And then that dwindles down furthermore to about 170,000 STEM graduates. So it's really important to engage them, not have them fall through in these bends in the pipeline or pathways. So we need to refine the recruitment process. So we need to have structured interviews and utilize non-judgmental approach when we're recruiting for radiology residency. We need to use holistic recruitment methods. So consider experiences, attributes, as well as academic metrics. Use departmental diversity policy and strategic planning for applications review and ranking. We need to establish an inclusive work culture, which includes diverse groups to feel valued and welcome. They have to have equal access to opportunity and open communication. Human resources should include anti-discrimination and family leave policies and gender transition plans, as well as transparency. Gender equity is facilitated by having clear family leave policies. And you know, your organization should consider having lactation and prayer rooms at the workplace. And allow debates and conversations from multicultural work groups. So equitable professional growth opportunities should exist. So all professionals thrive in an organization that recognizes their accomplishments. So we need to retain a diverse physician pool by acknowledging these accomplishments and opening opportunities for advancement. So leadership positions should be offered to talented women as well as underrepresented minorities. And also have effective sponsorship that needs to promote diversity in leadership. A lot of times financial incentives and prioritization may not be given to DEI. One of the big barriers of our program is that, you know, implementing DEI lacks financial or infrastructural support, which is necessary to do so. There may be low priority given to these projects from the management team since it does not directly affect the financial gains. And then the next thing is that we need to integrate training the trainees. So we must first acknowledge that there is a challenge of improving diversity in radiology. Some steps to change the status quo is having open discussions regarding challenges in recruitment and retention of underrepresented minorities. We need to reflect and reassess how we are doing often, educate the medical students about our specialty, and departments should allow protected time for faculty and residents in educating undergraduate students. Some of the initiatives that work are radiology interest groups, teaching sessions, workshops, symposia, meetings and conferences. So ACR has a medical student symposium. There is a radiology student interest group that you can follow, that's nationwide. There are lots of programs through ACR regarding our specialty. And lots of webinars, for instance, like what we're doing today. You can also talk about virtual shadowing in radiology for those students who want to know what we do. And then there's a whole curriculum in the DEI space for radiology program directors and residents in the AP DR program. So mentorship is shown to be useful and important for success and retention of underrepresented minorities in medicine. This takes thoughtful planning and oversight. This is to help minorities get promotions, faculty development, research, educational support, clinical assignments, and administrative duties. So mentorship is very important to cultivate diversity in our field. Some of the ACR initiatives include radiologists with disabilities, developing a community for radiologists and radiation oncologists with disabilities to offer opportunities for networking and mentoring. Totally Rad is a program that takes outreach efforts onto the road with clinical skill workshops to target medical schools with heavy URM enrollment. There's also transgender and gender diverse health advocacy for transgender and gender expansive patients. And then, of course, there's grassroots chapter diversity network, where the chapter leaders engage their members to actively promote diversity and inclusion to align with this mission. I want to be talking about some AUR initiatives, which includes LADIR, which stands for Leaders in Advocating Diversity and Inclusion in Radiology. It's a special interest group. Our mission is to help radiology departments in supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, and a sense of belonging within radiology, medicine, and the greater community. LADIR aims to create a multi-institutional structure to exchange ideas, share resources, and establish best practices and expert consensus in this area. Our vision is to focus on amplifying key areas, including education and curriculum development, policy and best practices, recruitment, mentorship, and pathway development, communication and social media, research and scholarship, community engagement, and artificial intelligence development. Here's a picture of our group. We met at the AUR meeting at the end of April to discuss our strategies to promote members and to work on all the projects in the 6 areas that I just talked about. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that there is business and social arguments to support diversity and inclusion. Academic medicine has adopted diversity as a core value. Implementing DEI at the level of recruitment, training, promotion, leadership, and management is vital to the mission of radiology. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and we'll open up the session for discussions and questions.
Dr. Choe, thank you so much for that great overview of the topics in this area. At this point, we do have the ability to open up mics, so if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Just make sure it's for everyone to see. I'm monitoring that area. You can also use the raise hand function, and we're looking at everyone's logging so we can actually activate your microphones. But we would love to hear from this group. We've got about 30 minutes for discussion. And maybe while people are either typing or formulating their questions, I'll kick us off. But one of the things you talked about was the business argument for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a lot of the work that's done in that space, is pulling in from other areas outside of medicine, outside of radiology. How do you begin to talk to people around, in their shop, in radiology, how do we begin to really make that argument? I think sometimes the conversation seems so distant because, McKinsey said in business, and it's easy for people to say, well, we're different, we're radiology. And not that I think that that's true, but how do we begin to have those conversations that are very specific to radiology?
So I know that medicine is not a business for all of us in radiology. We are taking care of patients and trying to improve, communities that we serve. But we all know that all these health organizations, it is a business. They have to be mindful of business and the bottom line. So when you're talking to the leaders in administration, a lot of them particularly are interested in being able to, promote practices that will affect their bottom line. So I think when we're talking to the administrators of the hospitals, one of the things that you can do is say, look, diversity may not mean anything to us at the moment, but there's a strong business case to show them that, having diverse physician population actually will, promote their bottom line, because we're going to have more engagement of underserved patients and minority populations, and allow them to have utilization of services such as screening for cancer and coming in for care that they may not show up if we don't have diverse healthcare providers.
Great, thank you. Again, if folks have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or to raise your hand and we'll take you off of mute. While we're waiting, I will start another question. So we do have a comment from Louise Thompson. Says, thank you for that great overview of all the concepts. So absolutely reinforce that. It was a great conversation. And we're not done. So we would encourage folks to come off mute or to open up their mics. So we can do that for you. If you've got comments or if you've got specific questions for Dr. Choe or for the group, you can really do that. One of the things that you mentioned as we think about a lot of the programs, oftentimes when we look at what is taking place in departments, it's really easy for us to design programs that are externally facing, right? So we can go out into the community and do, screening mammography for underserved folks who may not necessarily come in, but it's oftentimes a bigger lift to actually turn inward and look at some of the things that you talked about. And I was wondering if you could share some of your experiences around what those sorts of internal conversations are like at your place. And maybe we can begin to get some conversations of people sharing some of the challenges and opportunities that sit as you begin to look at how we change our own cultures.
Right. So I'm very happy to say that Penn State Health as an organization has huge resources for us for diversity and inclusion. We have a very active diversity and equity program. Basically, a couple of years ago, they asked each department to have a vice chair of diversity, which is huge because every single department has a vice chair of DEI. And we all meet quarterly to discuss issues. And we're having initiatives across the entire organization to figure out social determinants of health. We're doing research on why patients don't come in for the services that they need. So we're looking at the they used to call it no-show rates, but we're calling it missed opportunity rates to see, where they live. Is it the insurance? It is a language barrier. Some patients don't understand reminder calls because it's in English. They don't understand what we're talking about, et cetera. So we're definitely looking inward to serve our own institution. So it's been a really positive experience for me to be part of this whole consortium of like-minded people to raise awareness. And also we're affiliated with the medical school. So we have projects for medical students to get involved in this type of research. So it's been a really great experience to allow, all of us to work in this space and promote it the best we can. And as I said at the very beginning of the talk, it will be a very long, sustained effort. You can't just do it once and be done. It has to be an ongoing, continual process of, work and reflection.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We do have 2 questions from the chat, and I'll just read those out. And again, if there are folks who want to just have their own question or if they want to come off, just use the raise hand function, and then we can open up your mic. But the first question or the next question is from Dr. Grayson, who wonders about how to motivate co-residents that don't think diversity is a big deal here.
That's a great question. So one of the things that we have created is a resident champion for diversity. So we created a diversity committee in our own radiology department. And what we do is we tell stories. So I think storytelling is really important to allow other residents who don't care about it to understand what it means. So, for example, microaggression. Like when I was growing up, when I came to the US, I kind of squashed my own culture because I thought I had to really fit into the American culture. So that was my way of dealing with microaggression and things like that. But in this day and age, I think it's really good that we're actually talking about it to trying to stop it rather than having the person who's the subject of microaggression just put it under the carpet or bury it under, repress it. So I think storytelling and having a resident champion will go a long way to allow people who don't believe in it to change their minds. Because if you actually tell them what happened to me, like I share my story, it's more impactful because it's someone that I work with and I tell them, hey, this is how I feel. And that's why, you know, courage is important, because sometimes you don't want to tell them what happened to you. It takes courage to share these stories. You know, like when I started, you know, school here, like people were spitting on my hair, throwing gum in my face. I mean, it was really bad, but I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to. I didn't want to share that story. But now that I'm sharing it, people understand that it needs to be addressed, and that should not be a norm. It should not be allowed.
It's such a great point to remind us that the power of storytelling really exists. And I think, what we also see through studies is it's much easier to kind of otherize people when they're not a personal contact or there's proximity that prevents that connection from being made. And I think to your point, as we look at our group dynamic, being able to tell those stories, these are our co-residents, our co-faculty, our co-workers, and it's a lot easier to put names and faces to these experiences when they actually have names and faces and not an abstract concept. So great point. Absolutely. We have another question here from Dr. Chan. It's a little bit long. I will read it here. Radiology pipeline has always been leaky, as a small but significant proportion of radiology trainees have decided on radiology after medical school. How do we ensure proper exposure of radiology as a serious consideration as a future career choice for all medical students, especially those less likely to have been exposed to radiology, such as URMs, with less personal exposure to the medical professions?
Right. So we're finding that you can't wait till medical school to reach out to these students. You really have to start way earlier, like as I said, like kindergarten to 12th grade, because basically by the time they get to medical school, it may be too late, because you need to, students to be interested in science and know that it is a possibility. So we're doing things like outreach to high school students, for example. I'm a member of the DEI committee for the Society of Breast Imaging. So we do these monthly outreach to high school students and even students in technical schools that, we show them what we do. We show them what it's like. We show them that you can do it. And if they're interested, to contact us to help them get into medical school. But these are high school students, to get into college and to medical school. So I think the key is to get to them very early rather than wait till medical school. The other thing is vertical integration during medical school. So, at Penn State, we have radiologists going to anatomy classes. So they do it by system by system. So we have MSK radiologists, for example, going to talk to them about, bone and joints when they do orthopedics. We have ultrasound faculty going to like a GI curriculum is tied to ultrasound per se. So I think having a vertical integration of radiology faculty into the medical school curriculum is very important. We also have shadowing rotations. It's called early career explorations, where we host medical students to come and just sit in the reading rooms and go through all of the different areas just to see what we do. Because most students don't have the idea how we work. They have this misconception that we sit in a dark room and have no interaction with anybody. So when they come and rotate with us for 2 weeks, they're amazed at the incredible variety of things that we do. And so that, that's been really helpful for us to raise awareness of our specialty. But I think the key to get underrepresented minorities into medical school and into radiology is to get to them in elementary school, in high school, rather than wait till medical school.
Great point. Just as a further question there, which was part of this, how do we touch and connect with URMs? Curious about your thoughts and experiences where part of that notion of getting folks out there, they need to see who they can be, but then there's also a lot of pressure that gets put on. If you're the only URM or the only woman in a group, you get pulled into a lot of places and asked to do a lot of things. And that's not necessarily always aligned with, the rewards that sit in that space. So I was wondering if you could share your experience, or what are your thoughts around how do we make this everyone's work so that it doesn't fall to 2 or 3 people in a department, or what are your thoughts on how to advocate in this space?
Absolutely. So yes, I mean, if you're the token woman and you're doing all this outreach for women's issues, you're going to get burnt out really quickly. So the importance is to be able to reach out to your colleagues, whether they're women or men, to come to your aid. So I think just to share your experiences, share these numbers, because some of the people in my you know, organization or department don't know the statistics, don't realize that there's such few women going into radiology. So, I mean, you know, the Association of Women Radiologists, it shouldn't just be all women getting in there. We need men. Like there's a movement called He for She, for example, like on Twitter. So, you know, it shouldn't just be women working for this goal. It shouldn't just be the underrepresented minority people. It should be like, for example, when we have seminars for microaggression, how we stop it. If you're the person who's being picked on, it's much more powerful to have someone else who's not being picked on to stand up for you. So we have these monthly meetings called Upstander Cafe, where we meet together to basically help people who are in that situation and stand up for them. You know what I mean? So it's much easier if you have somebody next to you saying, hey, I'm not sure I understand you correctly. Did you mean what you just said? I mean, that's much more powerful coming from somebody else than if I try to stop them from saying something. So, I mean, we're educating people to understand that it can't just be the work of the minority, you know, promoting minority. We need the majority of the people promoting the minority people.
Excellent. Other questions and comments from our group? We've got about 15 minutes left. We'd love to get your comments or any questions that you may have. We've had a lot of people, and thank you, Dr. Chan, for your comments and your questions. While we're waiting, one of the things that is often really impactful to understand in terms of our behavior is we tend to, when we think things are important, we tend to prioritize those. Things that are prioritized organizationally oftentimes have money associated with them. When we look at a lot of the work that's done in this space, there's a lot of variety, but curious to know what is taking place at Penn. Are your positions paid for? Is your protected time? And then really kind of opening up the conversation for those who might be asked to do these sorts of things. How do they begin to advocate for that time and or money that goes along with the things that we're saying are important?
Yes, so all of the vice chairs of DEI do get a small amount of academic time, so we can work in this space. But obviously, the people who are in that position are very passionate about it. So we do put a lot more time in than what's allotted to us. The organization also has a little bit of money, and also having a chair in your department that's in your corner is very helpful. So our chairman is very, very supportive of our endeavors. So if we need money for putting on a seminar or, having like a, we're going to go talk to people out in the community, et cetera, it gets paid for. So I know a lot of like the virtual radiology forums can take some money, and also visiting students. So to, pay for their lodging, to pay for their food, for instance, I can petition him to open up some of the money that he has. He has like a discretionary fund or something. So if I write to him, he'll, open up that treasure box and share with us. So it's really important to have your chairman in your corner, I think, to work in this space, because if you don't have somebody in the top supporting your cause, it's very difficult to do.
As a follow-up question, if you're at an institution where you may not necessarily have the active support of a chair, any thoughts on how to make that activation take place, or to get access to that slush fund or that little treasure box of funding for things to take place?
I think the more people you have in your diversity committee, for example, you can put a little bit of pressure on your chairman to get involved. So basically, our committee here involves pretty much every department, as well as all of the technologists, nurses, and sonographers, MRI techs, everybody. So it's kind of like a grassroots kind of organization where all the people in the department are represented. So if you have a huge group of people wanting to do something and you go to the chairman and say, all these people are in support, I think they'll have a hard time saying no, because everybody in the department wants to move this needle forward. And if they don't want to get involved, it will be very hard no when there's so many people who want to, propel this forward.
Positive peer pressure. Love
Yeah.
it. One of the things that I've certainly noticed is there are, because of just again the way that GME is structured, there are some really specific things that now need to take place in this space. So you think about approach to interviewing, we think about the support and the conversations that need to take place, but there's not necessarily the same sort of expectation or body that governs faculty, right? So there tends to be or can be a mismatch between our trainees as they're coming through, the conversations that they're having either in medical school or because of requirements, and then they meet the faculty brick wall. Any comments or thoughts around how you begin to narrow that chasm that can exist in that space?
Right. So I think the more younger people get involved in this work, the better it will be, because eventually these trainees will become faculty in all these different organizations, or they will go out into the private practice community. So one of the things I think that's important is to establish a culture of diversity in your own state. So I know all of the states have their own chapter. For instance, Pennsylvania Radiologic Society has a diversity subcommittee on membership for diversity. So as we get more and more people trained and exposed to this work as they go out into the community, into academics, it will really help propel this forward. So this is really important work. It needs to continue. We need to engage the young people and, as I said, teach the teachers kind of thing. So that's why I think having people learn how to do it in this space and go out and teach other people and convert one or two people at a time, it's going to work better if you have ambassadors or champions going out into the community, into the academics, to become mentors or sponsors to allow URMs to grow in this space.
Excellent, thank you. We do have another question here. 1 second, let me scroll up. All right, this is from Dr. Chan again. So McKinsey research demonstrated the positive financial implications associated with greater diversity and inclusion. Are there any portions of the study design that research work that can be persuaded and applied successfully and demonstrate the positive association in diagnostic or interventional radiology?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I don't think there are any current papers out there that addresses this specifically. I think this is one of the research avenues that the AUR later SIG group can certainly do. I know a lot of the program directors in AUR are also doing this important work. So I think it's something that we need to concentrate on and get work done, because I don't think there's anything out there looking at this specifically.
And when we looked at this, is a great question, just to connect this back to the later group, this issue around the business argument for this came up at the annual meeting a few weeks ago. And there were a few articles that we found around the how to begin to measure this, but we were not really able to find a lot of data that sat in the radiology literature that was actual data. So I think part of what later is doing, and there's a subgroup really kind of looking at best practices, and then really the whole data management aspect of how do we begin to create dashboards to be able to strengthen our argument around the business aspect, to be able to quantify either savings or increase revenue streams because of diversity. And I think that the point that Dr. Chan raises is really important, because in many ways there's that disconnect between the abstract notion that this will be helpful or will be beneficial and the very practical case study, even where we could say, at Hershey, they were able to save, $50,000 because they were able to do X, Y, and Z. So for those who may be interested in exploring this, I would really encourage you all to join later. There are the 7 groups that Dr. Choe talked about, and we really need help in this space to help collect data and to really think about what some of the best practices are. So all call and all welcome. We have about 9 minutes left, and let's just see and check chat to make sure that we've covered everyone. What are your thoughts, Dr. Choe, about this, about a notion that some have proposed, tying DEI metrics or participation to incentive plans and programs in the same way that we look at quality and safety and clinical output, because those are important things. We say that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging are also important. What are your thoughts about tying them in the same way that we do other things that are said
I
to be
think I think it's a very interesting notion. I think there's always a little bit of a trepidation when you tie something with an incentive pay, but actually Penn State Health is doing that a little bit. There's a small amount of incentive pay if you do research projects or projects in the DI space. So each of the departments were highly encouraged to come up with something to increase diversity, increase equity. So our division actually did a project where we looked at implicit bias tests. So all of us in the breast center took the implicit bias test, and then we had different seminars and education topics where people told us how to mitigate it and stuff like that, and then we took the test again. So we just finished that project, so we also did a survey afterwards to see if people liked it, whatever. So it will count towards a little bit of incentive pay. It's like part of the bonus structure. So I think it's a good idea, because it's something that we can it gives you a little bit of incentive to spend all that time to do this important work rather than do it for, because people don't want to do it if it's not tied to something that helps their career or promotes them somehow, because time is precious. We're all trying to be mindful of work and life balance. So we're asking people to do something they may or may not think is useful if it's not going to help their career development. So in a way, I think it's very useful to have that opportunity to use that as a platform to do something, very useful and helpful in that space.
Great. You'd mentioned professional development. I'm wondering if you could share with the group your journey, in this space, and then how you think about putting this together with your professional development. I think for many people who are very passionate about this, there may be a struggle or a disconnect with how do you also use this to build your career so that the time that you're spending doesn't have to be separate from the things that you are passionate about.
Right. So, for me, I came to this country without speaking any English. So I do have, I love this country. I think it's, even though we have problems, it's a wonderful place to be. And it's given me such huge opportunities to become who I am. And so I'd like to pay it forward. I'd like to help other students who are coming from all over to, attain the success that I was able to achieve. So it's really great that a lot of these academic programs are recognizing that this is important work, and it's worthy of publication and it's worthy of discussion. So before, I think to get a publication, you have to do like some type of an IRB or like basic science or something like that. But I think this work is important enough that a lot of the journals, professional journals, are allowing us to publish in this area and do research that's necessary to, have outreach programs that have, educate people. And education is another avenue that is really important. So I'm very happy that people recognizing this work as being a scholarly work, to help us promote our careers in this way.
Absolutely. Great insight. We've got another question here. And this is from Dr. Hershey. What I encountered in the URM pipeline program is that most of the URM students will not make it to become medical students to begin with. Thus, any effort to do outreach in a local community, lost myself there. with URM populations is mostly unfruitful for physicians in general. Radiology is even tougher because we're not as visible to patients and the community. My idea is to encounter this by involving myself in local medical societies, whether they be at the county or state level, and those that do outreach efforts with other physicians, non-radiologists, so that students can see me as a radiologist alongside a family physician, internist, surgeon, etc. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. There are programs where we actually go out to elementary schools and actually present yourself as a radiologist. And if you're out there with, family practitioners, nurses, technologists, you present yourself as a team, right? Medicine is teamwork, interdisciplinary. So I think that's a really great idea. Because, one of the things that people don't see is that, we are absolutely interdisciplinary in our profession. We work with everybody, and that would allow non-physicians and people who are not familiar with radiology to see that we touch everyone and we work with everybody. Every patient that comes through the door is touched by radiology. So I think it's really, and we're sort of like the unsung heroes. Like people don't know what we do or how we contribute to their care. So I think going out there with other people in the non-physician space is very important, because we do outreach all the time with like mammography technologists and nurses for screening mammography. So I think that's a really, really, really great plan.
Excellent. We've got about a minute left. Dr. Choe, this has been wonderful. Do you want to share any closing comments or takeaways for the group that's here? If you could do 5 or 6 things, if you only had 1 or 2 things, what would it be in terms of really advancing this topic?
So I would say, please join the AUR Leader Group. Please, if you don't have a diversity committee in your institution or department, consider starting one, and really consider being a mentor to young students, do outreach to high school students, and have virtual or in-person visiting to your department so students who don't know about us can find out about us.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Choe, I want to thank you so much for taking time this afternoon and imparting all this knowledge, sharing your perspectives, and for the really wonderful discussion. To our participants who were listening or participating, again, thank you for making this such a highly engaging and helpful conversation. It doesn't end here, and as you mentioned, we do have the later group within AUR. All are welcome. We'd love help. And even if that you're looking for resources or a soundboard, again, this later group serves that function. And it's really important that we each think about in our local spaces and in our own spheres of influence, how we can participate in this process. So with that, we'll say thank you so much to all and have a great evening. And we'll see you in 2 months' time for the next in the series of the AUR Grand Rounds. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.